and welcome to Sounding Board, a community access television production of Soroptimist International of Novato. Soroptimist International is an organization that advances the status of women and girls locally and internationally. My name is Madeline Peters, and the topic for tonight's Sounding Board program is Emerging Trends in Tobacco Products and Marketing to Young People. And we're fortunate to have with us Alissa Ralston, who's going to educate all of us about the tobacco industry and marketing. I will just say one thing about Alissa's background and then turn this over to her. Alissa began her career as a clinical laboratory scientist. She has a Master of Science degree in Clinical Laboratory Science from San Francisco State University. And she became interested in what eventually became known as HIV/AIDS in the early 1980s. Now, Alissa, I'm going to turn this over to you because you really have a stellar background, not only your formal education, but the work that you've done, and then also targeting tonight's topic. So, Alissa, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks so much for having me first, Madeline. This is really going to be fun. I'm looking forward to sharing this information with more people. As you mentioned, I started out as a clinical laboratory scientist and was going to graduate school when what became known as the HIV epidemic emerged, and I was very interested in sharing that information and became involved with our Marin County Health Department's task force on HIV, and eventually started working as a community educator, what is now known as the Marin AIDS Project. It used to be the Marin AIDS Support Network when it started. So after several years of doing that and working in HIV education, both with schools and community groups and health educators, and I'd done a number of consultations with various districts around Marin and even around the country, and I was approached by some people who had just begun working with tobacco education here in the county. And because tobacco education was in health education classes, as was the HIV education, they asked if I would be interested in doing some tobacco work, which was something I really knew nothing about, except that my mother had just very recently been diagnosed with emphysema as a result of her lifelong smoking habit. So I said, maybe this is a time for me to make a little bit of a switch, and I began working in tobacco education.
I think what impresses me, as I look at the notes here that you gave me and then just hearing your story is how focused your education is and how broad-based your work life has been in terms of your role in HIV/AIDS and then moving on in health education in a variety of venues. You actually bring to this topic all those experiences and backgrounds, which are varied and deep. You just touched a little bit. You said you knew nothing about the tobacco education or what that was all about, except that, your involvement with your mother being diagnosed with emphysema. So I'm assuming that's what brought you, that people asking you to come and help with the health education, that's what brought you to this tobacco work.
I think that was a large part of it.
Okay, now you also said you knew nothing, so tell me, given your track record and your education and your influence nationally, what did you have to do to educate yourself?
That's a great question. Well, fortunately, my first position was actually with the County Office of Education in their tobacco use prevention education program under that grant that they have from the California State Department of Education. So that program had just started a year or so prior to my coming on board, so there were a lot of educational opportunities to train people from around the state through both the American Lung Association, the American Cancer Society, and the California State Department of Education. So that was sort of the beginning. And then I was fortunate to also be asked to work with Bay Area Community Resources, which I've been working with them since 2001. primarily in tobacco education. So I started out being more broad-based and doing programs in various community settings, and really narrowed down to working with youth and young people after a couple of years. So that's how it all came about.
Did you ever smoke?
I did. Well, as I mentioned, my mother was
Yes.
a smoker, and like many young people, that's what I saw in my house, and to me that was part of becoming grown up. You know, it was what the adult woman in my life did. So, and in fact, not only the adult women, but many of the adult women, in terms of my aunts, you know, and uncles, not women, but, you know, adults. So I started smoking probably in my junior year in high school, on and off, and smoked on and off for a number of years, probably until,
Oh, you don't have
I
to go
don't
there.
have to say, I can't think when. It's been a long time, thank goodness, well over 30 years since I've been
But
smoking.
I can understand that probably the other dimension that you bring to this is the knowledge of tobacco and the harmful side of tobacco, but you also bring your own experience in terms of the struggle to, you know, the struggle to get out of tobacco, using tobacco, but probably also, you know, like this was the thing to do. It was tobacco, it was marketing, and you bought the message, and lots of people bought the message.
And they still do.
What does your project do?
Well, my project's called Tobacco for Youth, and we really focus on young adults up through age 25. So over the years, it's had various focuses and work plans, but we've worked with both the Community College and Dominican University to help bring about their smoke-free policies. Bay Area Community Resources as an agency has been working with the Smoke-Free Marin Coalition to help develop smoke-free, clean indoor air laws, outdoor air laws, and change various policies around the county. So specifically in my program right now, we're working on a project which we call Interview as Intervention, and we train young adults to go out in the community and interview young adult tobacco users. We do about a 20 to 30 minute interview, and that process allows people to start thinking about their own tobacco use and hopefully move along what we call stages of change, from a place where they may not even be thinking about quitting to starting to say, okay, maybe I should quit. And we've actually had a number of people, because of the actual interview process, make a quit attempt or successfully quit. So that's one of my most exciting projects.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. It's almost like a pre-approach to to individual awareness. That whole interview process. How do you get these contacts then, or how are these how are people selected to be interviewed?
Well, our interviewers, who are young people, either look for people in various locations on their campuses or in the community who they see are tobacco users. We have one interviewer who sort of has a gut instinct of who might be a smoker, so she just sort of approaches people and asks them if they smoke or not, and finds people that way. And they may be tobacco users. They don't have to be smokers. They could be chewing tobacco users. So any form of tobacco is game for our program.
That sounds like in this research and sampling, that's like Snowball Effect. You find one person, and you find another person.
And that works that way as well. People refer to other people, and our interviewers will ask people they interviewed, do you have other friends? And
it sort of populates itself. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Why do young people even start smoking?
You would think with all the information out there about the horrible health effects of these products that it wouldn't be something somebody would pick up. But young people start smoking for all the same reasons that many of us started when we were young. It's something that people in their family do, people they see who are adults do. It's a great social lubricant. If you're somebody who may be a little awkward at making social contacts, when you see other people who are smoking, you can ask them for a light, you can ask them for a cigarette, you can offer them a cigarette. You can do all of these kind of things that help smooth over making acquaintances and building new relationships.
So it's actually used as a, it's funny, I didn't think of it as social networking, but that's what you're describing to me. It's a way for people to connect with one another.
It
over
certainly
smoking.
can be. And there are so many ways that the tobacco industry has figured out how to target young people without officially targeting young people.
Can you go into that a little bit more?
I sure can. Okay. You know, we now have laws that prohibit advertising that is specifically marketed to youth who are under 18. It's no longer legal to have, for example, ads on TV or cartoon characters like Joe Camel. You know, he's been outlawed for a while. But when you think about it, first of all, where's the line between 18 and 17 and 16, you know, and 15? Young people always are looking up to those people who are a year or two older than them, to the products that those people are using. So something that's marketed to 18-year-olds is obviously going to appeal to 17 and 16-year-olds and younger. But when we think about it, if you think about going into a convenience store, where are those products located? Usually right at eye level, where young people walk in and that's what they see. And the brands that are most heavily advertised, the three most heavily advertised brands, are the three brands that young people smoke the most.
So this is, well, we're really getting into the marketing side and the targeting.
Right.
There's a Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, 2009. So here we have, as you said, convenience stores, and they're showcasing products of the big three.
Right. And others.
Okay, right. So what can you tell us about this this act and public law? It looks like 11131.
Right. Well, it's interesting because one of the components of that ad had to do with taking out flavorings in cigarettes, which they did manage to do, except for one.
Okay.
What flavor do you think did not get taken out of cigarettes?
Mint.
Menthol.
Menthol.
Exactly. Menthol. So it's very, very interesting that that was the one flavor that didn't make it. And obviously we have menthol cigarettes, which target a very huge market, actually primarily African Americans and young people. Very popular to have menthol cigarettes with young people because menthol cools the throat. It anesthetizes the nerves in the throat, so it makes it easier for new smokers to inhale.
Oh, so keep the flavoring that just makes smoking more
easier.
Yeah. Oh my
exactly.
goodness.
And what many people aren't aware is even cigarettes that don't advertise themselves as menthol, almost all of them also have menthol in them. It's just not the predominant flavor that you have.
You have a lot of products here. I don't know if you want to
I have
describe
all kinds of goodies.
I know it's like it. I think it's. Well, one of the things that struck me before you even show the products, one of the things that struck me when you and I first started talking is that we have so many laws against drug use and alcohol use, but people don't pay attention to tobacco because it's not illegal. And yet we know the harmful effects. And so that conversation, along with the information that you've just provided right now, it really helps my awareness and public awareness of the impact of tobacco and the research that goes into keeping tobacco use popular.
Well, you know, tobacco is probably the only product that when used the way that it's intended is probably going to kill at least half of the people who use it regularly.
Shocking. That's
when you think about it.
Yeah, that's shocking.
It is shocking and it's horrible, but it's not something where you see the immediate effects generally. You know, young people don't usually have serious health consequences within the first couple of years of when they're using this product. Of course, damage is being done with every single cigarette, but it's microscopic generally and not something that they recognize. Although I would have to say that particularly in youth who are involved in sports, they will frequently comment, I can't run as fast after smoking a few years, or I'm coughing more when I'm playing soccer. Those kind of things do come up, but they're brushed aside a lot in that invincibility of youth.
It's interesting because, you know, one of the agendas is also to get youth moving, get people moving a
Right.
lot more too, and it could be that as that campaign is successful, more people who are smokers will realize their limitations physically, and that will at least draw their attention a little bit more sharply to the fact that this is something they can choose not to do, and increase their ability in an athletic area.
Right. And we're fortunate, our community is not really representative of the whole country, and I think
True.
Marin has a lot more opportunities to have a healthy lifestyle than some places in the nation. So we're fortunate in that aspect, but tobacco gets in there. We forget that tobacco kills more people than HIV, car accidents, suicide, alcohol, other drug use, all combined. So because it's something that happens every day, it doesn't make the news.
It's just become part of the fabric of our existence.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, can you do a little show and tell?
I would love to.
Okay.
One of the things I mentioned is since that Tobacco Control Act came into effect, flavorings have been taken out of cigarettes.
Right, yeah.
But what the law didn't cover was flavoring in cigars. So things like, I'll show you a little example, small cigars.
Yeah, if you can hold it up again.
Is that a little better there? Okay, small cigars don't fall under that regulation. So therefore, flavorings are allowed in small cigars. And the only real difference, or the main difference, between a small cigar and a cigarette has to do with the wrapper. A cigarette is wrapped in paper, and a cigar is wrapped in a tobacco leaf. So small cigars, which are very popular with young people, they're especially popular in sort of the hip-hop culture, can be flavored and can also be sold in small packages. Our laws prohibit what we call single sales. So you can't go into a store and buy 1 or 2 cigarettes, but you can go and buy a package of 3 cigars. Small cigars, and single big cigars, obviously. So cigars are very, very popular and often a lead-in into tobacco use.
And then there's something, I guess you said blunt wrappers?
Blunt wrappers, yeah. Blunt wrappers are primarily used to smoke marijuana, which is something we're not focusing in on this. I'm blocking
but
it.
This looks like those fruit roll-ups.
It does, doesn't it? And they come in all these yummy flavors. They come in grape and cherry and bubble gum and cola and watermelon and probably every sticky sweet, candy type flavor that you can think of. And as I say, they're primarily used to wrap up marijuana, but the wrapper itself is made of tobacco, and so it has nicotine in it.
My goodness.
So we forget about that sometimes as a lead-in gateway kind of a product.
Okay, the next is you have it was the first PowerPoint slide, and it's a rolling machine. Can you talk about that?
Just the fact that because cigarettes are increasingly becoming taxed more, and the new California Cancer Research Act, which hopefully will, and I say hopefully, pass and will increase the tax on cigarettes to an additional $1 a pack. As the price of tobacco increases, we know that fewer and fewer people actually smoke. So what happens then is for people who want to keep smoking, they look for less expensive ways to smoke. And what we haven't seen here in our community, but are becoming more and more popular in other areas of the country, are actual stores where you can go in and buy loose tobacco and they will roll the cigarettes in the store. But people can also buy loose tobacco and roll them themselves, either with very simple manual machines or with fancier electronic machines where they can roll their own cigarettes.
This is amazing. This is amazing. We have about 10 minutes left in our program, so I want to make sure that you highlight the different things that there's a whole list here we have to do.
Well, there's a lot of new products, but I do want to show you at least one more, which is a huge category of products, which are dissolvables. These are products that contain nicotine. This is just one example of sticks, which are just little tobacco sticks people can suck on in their mouths. orbs, which are kind of like Tic Tacs. They look like just small mints. And then there's also products that look like the little breath papers that people have,
yes,
that dissolve on your mouth but actually have nicotine. And the tobacco industry continues to come out with more and more new products that don't necessarily have tobacco but have nicotine. For example, products that are currently being tested include hand gel with nicotine, lotion, a body lotion with nicotine in it. I'm trying to think of some of the other products. A mouth spray, which is actually a very effective way of getting nicotine right to the brain. And all of these are being researched and tested in various parts of the country and actually marketed and used in other parts of the world.
That's one of the other things that you mentioned too, is the United States has restrictions on advertising that may not necessarily exist in other countries.
Absolutely.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the tobacco industry recognized many years ago that part of their market was decreasing. The more educated, economically well-off people were starting to smoke less. And so what they did, and this is well documented in the tobacco industry documents, is started targeting poorer, less educated people. So products are specifically marketed to lower socioeconomic groups. I actually heard on a webcast recently that there was a cigarette brand that actually gave away free blankets to homeless shelters in New York that were labeled with their cigarette brand. Think about that. A population with no money at all. They're living in shelters.
Yes.
But they're being exposed to the supposed goodwill of the tobacco industry. And the tobacco industry does do a lot to try and create a good image. They sponsor music venues, opera, ballet, fine arts, in addition to the more obvious venues like NASCAR and dances and concerts and venues like that, to get their name out as the good guys that are helping to provide some sort of wonderful service to the community.
Oh, my goodness.
In fact, one thing that was well documented was that the tobacco industry in 1 year spent significantly more in promoting the fact that it had given money to these venues than the actual money that they gave. So if you think about that, it's all creating a public image that we're the good guys.
Yeah, yeah. We have only 5 minutes left, and I know you have a lot of goodies here, but I really want you to thinking about what is it that you want to share with the public in the few minutes that we have.
Well, I'd like to share some of the marketing techniques that are actually going on. I mentioned concerts and venues, giveaways, contests. People our age are maybe less aware of QR codes, which hopefully we'll see an example of, but these are visual cues that people can click onto with their cell phone.
Yes.
So by holding your cell phone up to a QR code, that will download various information onto your telephone. So that could be free coupons to buy cigarettes, knowing how to get discounted coupons to buy cigarettes, those kind of things. The industry also, whenever it promotes a contest where it's collecting information, will save those names and create a database so that when there's maybe a law that smokers might not be in favor of, the industry has a way of contacting those people immediately so that they can talk to their politicians and lobby against what might be in the interest of public health.
It's just amazing. One of the things here, I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about. You mentioned electronic cigarettes.
Electronic cigarettes have become so popular recently because of the media. They are devices that heat up electronically and vaporize nicotine. So electronic cigarettes, the prices come down dramatically in the last few years. They were over $100 when they first came on the market. Now they can be bought singly for about $10. they do come in different flavors because we're not talking about tobacco.
That's right.
So we can have different flavors there. And various laws have had to be rewritten so that they include electronic cigarettes, the banning of electronic cigarettes in public venues, because there's a misconception that it's just water vapor that's going out into the air. But it's not just water vapor. There are other chemicals that are also happening in that.
It just seems so insidious. It's like the products are increasingly developed, and the marketing, I think that's the thing that just shocks me, is the extent of the marketing. And some of the things that you showed me, they look like conventional treats that you would pick up at
and there's certainly a danger about those if young children pick them up. I mean, I'm really frightened about things like hand lotion and gel. If you think about them containing nicotine, that could, especially if a young child got a hold of something like that, they could really become poisoned with nicotine poisoning. It's
like, what's happened to one sort of sense of reason? You know, it's like, is it really just let's see how much more money we can make, how many people we can target?
I think the industry is trying to squeeze every cent it can out for as long as it can.
Possible,
You know, and there actually is a strong argument being made now to, you know, to make cigarettes illegal. I mean, people say, if it's so dangerous, why are they still on the market? And it really has to do with a long history, marketing, economics. A lot of people's livelihood depends on this product. Which is unfortunate.
Yes.
It's very unfortunate. Yeah. And trying to find ways to turn over the economy of tobacco. For many countries abroad, that's a major, major source of income for the country. The government actually owns the cigarette factories in China and many other countries.
So you won't see things changing quickly. I think the interesting point, because we're right at the end of our show right now, the interesting point is just how it's not just stopping smoking. It's also looking at many people's livelihoods depend on, they work in the tobacco industry, and so you're talking about what do people do if tobacco products are outlawed. I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for being here today. Obviously, we need to spend a lot more time together, and you have shared with us a vast amount of information, and you certainly have educated me. I'd like to remind our viewing audience that the topic today was emerging trends in tobacco products and marketing to young people.